Hello world, it's Austin. Let's talk about being transgender and Christian. So have you ever heard the phrase, "that's just my cross to bear"? People tend to use this when they're talking about something annoying or difficult or doing something that they don't necessarily want to do but might be good for somebody else. Sometimes this phrase is used to indicate some kind of internal struggle that we're dealing with, and people who believe that being LGBT is sinful sometimes say that our gender or our attraction is our cross to bear, that everybody has something that they want but they shouldn't, and that we're called to fight against it somehow. But where did this phrase come from, and what might it mean to carry a cross? And can our gender identity or our sexuality be considered one of those crosses? Jesus talks about taking up a cross a couple of different times in the Gospels, so let's just focus on one. We're going to look at Mark 8:34 through 38. These verses say, "Jesus called the crowd with his disciples, and he said to them, 'If any want to become my followers, let them deny themselves, take up their cross, and follow me. For those who want to save their life will lose it, and those who lose their life for my sake and for the sake of the gospel will save it.'" So this is some hard-hitting stuff, and as usual, we're left wondering whether Jesus is talking literally or in metaphor. Unfortunately for Jesus' disciples, he was probably being literal when he spoke of death, because anybody who stood up to the Roman Empire was likely to be crucified. Nowadays, these verses could still be literal for Christians living in Kenya, the Congo, Libya, or Egypt. And there's no doubt that in some places, Jesus' call to lay down one's life for one's faith is real and relevant. But what about those of us who live in countries where Christianity is the majority and has actually become very much like the empire that Jesus worked to subvert? How do we understand Jesus' call to deny ourselves, take up our cross, and follow him in our context? So let's take this in two parts. First of all, what does it mean to deny ourselves? Some may say that this means getting rid of our desires, not doing the things that we want to do. Some people during Lent give up beer or chocolate as a way of denying themselves, but is delayed gratification really what Jesus meant? Some say that LGBT people need to deny their attractions or deny their deep sense of identity. Is that what self-denial looks like? And does Jesus call us to reject parts of our very essence? Author and New Testament professor Matthew Skinner says that that isn't what self-denial is about. He believes that denying the self has to do with redefinition, that we're supposed to deny the ways that the world defines us in favor of defining ourselves by our relationship to God. Practically, this means instead of defining ourselves by our family roles or our jobs or how much we make or our skills or our addictions or anything else, we instead define ourselves in relationship. For transgender Christians, that might mean realizing that our trans identity is always secondary to our identity as beloved children of God and disciples. But this doesn't mean annihilating ourselves or erasing our identity. Skinner points out that denying ourself doesn't mean embracing suffering for suffering's sake, as if suffering itself was redemptive. We're already redeemed. In fact, Jesus spent his whole ministry healing the suffering of the sick and afflicted. His whole gig is restoring people to wholeness. Most trans people know a thing or two about suffering, and if we're going to allow ourselves to be brought to wholeness along with the rest of creation, then we need to be able to bring our entire selves, including our trans identity, into that relationship with God. So, to the second question, what does it mean to pick up a cross? Well, in the original sense, a cross was used to execute rebels and slaves who refused to submit to Rome's authority. Skinner says that when we pick up a cross, we affiliate ourselves with those who threaten ideologies that perpetuate oppression. Carrying your cross means joining your voice to a chorus of people who speak out against dehumanization, and when you do that, there's bound to be some backlash from the empire. People who stand up to the empire tend to experience death in some form. Jesus isn't calling us into suffering for suffering's sake. He's calling us to be ready, because when you stand up against oppression, you may experience some unfortunate and painful consequences. When some of us come out as trans, for example, we may lose friends and family. When trans people walk down the street at night, we can run the risk of physical violence because our lives, our very existence, are seen as a threat to the system in power. But God knows that. God knows the incredible suicide and murder rates that we face as trans people. So while some may need to be reminded that death is a fact, we're more likely to forget that through Christ we're called to life. Keep in mind that every time Jesus met a dying or dead person in his ministry, he raised them. So deny the things that try to keep you self-centered, and deny the things that tell you you're not good enough, and take up your cross by standing up for the people Jesus stood up for. Jesus said that you may lose your life for the sake of the gospel, but never forget what the gospel actually is. It's a promise of unstoppable love and a calling into abundant life. Thanks for watching, everybody. I hope this video spoke to you or said something that resonated with you in some way. If it did, put a note down in the comments below and let me know about it. I will see you back here next Wednesday for a new video. Take care of yourself. Peace.